Olio, we are a SaaS company, like many of you guys, a digital company. Just a little bit of my background. I've been doing this for too long. Not too long in terms of my enjoyment, but in terms of when I look at all the young faces in the audience, I've been doing it for a couple of decades. Some of the fun things we've done, we've floated on the stock market and we've taken the business private. So many of the stories listening to you guys in terms of your fast growth path and things like that, we have participated in all of that. One of the anecdotes I was just sharing is the thing, so when we started, we were not a SaaS company. We were a company that rented our software to people. So right at the beginning, I'm sure I said most of you people, that means nothing whatsoever, but there weren't SaaS companies. There were companies that installed software and anything, but we were new and different. We were going to rent our software to people, which was probably the foundation of SaaS, basically. So moving on. Do I need to get closer? Maybe I just need to be closer. I don't like being over here. Probably like many of you, we compete, most of our competitors are probably American companies, to be honest. We are a third of our businesses in America, a third of our businesses is here. And according to the industry analysts, we're one of the leaders in that little quadrant up there. Yes. So we are incredibly fortunate. I mean, hopefully it came across with Mark and Greg sitting there. We are incredibly passionate about our clients and incredibly passionate about helping our clients. And Mark, in customer success, is there to support Greg and make Greg as much of a success as we possibly can and understand what success means for Greg. We would be nothing without our clients. And here are a few of our clients. We are incredibly lucky to work with some amazing organizations, including Fidelity. But we also work for names that you all know, like the Amazons of this world. I will talk a little bit more about people like Bank of America later on. But we also work for all these kind of organizations that you rely on every day, like the Met Police or the central government. 500,000 people in the central government probably use our platform. So we are very lucky to have some incredible clients which allow us to do that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the work we've done with those clients. Yay! Okay. So this slide, I kind of go like, oh, why am I showing this slide? But actually, I think it's kind of really interesting. So, that's at the beginning where you all did Slido and you said, budgets are my biggest problem. And then we also had slides about, I can't find good quality people, but I've got too many applicants. And we had that kind of whole mixture. And that's what's going on in our world. We live in an insane world. When you think about it, you think about what is going on. We've got Russia. We've got the Middle East. We've got, apparently half the world will vote for new leaders next year, including Trump, maybe. What will Russia do? Will they try and help Trump get in? Who knows? We've got crazy inflation. We've got climate change. And so there's so much uncertainty in the world today. And that's probably why we're all got kind of tight budgets, basically. We don't really know quite what's going on. People are a little bit cautious. And so that's what we're all experiencing. And at the same time, we've got a talent shortage. So The Economist last week, the publication on Thursday, they were saying we are probably now in a situation where we're going to be looking at the world and saying we have a permanent talent shortage. How can we have a talent shortage when there is so much economic uncertainty? Imagine if we were booming. What would it be like that? And again, at the same time as having this kind of talent shortage, we're also getting too many applications, but too few applications. It's kind of like a bit of a crazy world we're in. Candidate expectations higher than ever. DE&I, again, it's got to be kind of front and center, not just because it's the right thing to do, but actually it's something that's really important to candidates as well. So if you want to hire people, you kind of need a diverse kind of environment. So those are some of the things that we're kind of all facing. So we strongly believe that data should be at the heart of your strategy. So why do we believe that? What does putting data at the heart of your strategy mean? Who knows? We're going to come to that in a minute. But before we get onto that, I think everyone would sort of agree that great reporting is a start to putting data at the center. So how many of you think they have great reporting? Ooh, we got one. We got one. Well, I'm very happy. That's good. There's normally about one in a room of, whenever I ask that question, and I can have hundreds in a room, there's normally one or two. But not many people think they've got great reporting, which is a bit of a shame, really, given that's probably step one into being data-driven. So you go to a party, hands up. You went to a party on a Saturday night? Some of you, hopefully. And you're the third person to arrive. And the first two people to arrive are these two. Okay, so left, right. Hands up if when you go to the party and you're standing at the door and you're looking in the room and you see these two people, do you approach the person on their left or do you approach the person on your right? So hands up if you approach the person on your left. A few.
Left or your left?
This one.
Oh, okay.
Hands up. Okay, hands up if you approach the person. Okay, hands up if you approach the person on the right. Okay, so this is just a kind of, it's a guy, I don't know, well, we left off slide, but a guy called Professor Todorov from Princeton University. He used a computer program to make these faces, apparently using all the things that we kind of like and dislike about faces. You can see, actually, they started as the same person, but they sort of just did a few things to the ears and the eye, the mouth and whatever. And this is kind of one of the reasons why also data needs to be at the center, because we're human, and humans are unfortunately inherently not so good at making decisions. We allow biases to creep into our decisions. That's the politest way of putting it. What does it mean? Things like this, so there's a few more studies. It means that basically people who are more trustworthy, have more trustworthy looking faces, they're more likely to get a loan. Apparently, if you have a more untrustworthy face, you're more likely to get the death penalty. And apparently CEOs with more competent looking faces get higher compensation. So I'm going to go and have that facelift. Anyhow, it's incredible how, these little things, I mean, you can see like everybody in the room wanted to go and approach the person on the right. Kind of crazy, no? You think about it. I mean, what it must be terrible to be the person on the left. Imagine what your view of the world is. I don't know, nobody wants to talk to me at parties. Anyhow, there are apparently 188 unconscious biases. So, I mean, that was obviously just it was a silly one to kind of illustrate we kind of just the faces and how we have a sort of bias towards, what we think a friendly person looks like. But apparently there's 188 unconscious biases which affect the way we make decisions. And we need to sort of guard against those, except for they're unconscious, so it's kind of hard to guard against them. And you may say, well, okay, what do these things do? So this picture represents 8 levels of an organization. And let's say we just have 1% bias. So roughly 50% of you had preferred the left to the right. Not 100% of you had preferred one to the other, but we had just 1% bias, so a tiny imperceptible amount of bias. This is what happens by the time we promote people up through the organizations. This is what happens by the time you get to the top of the organization. You end up with only at the top 35% people are of the orange, whatever the orange ones are. So just a tiny bit of bias has a huge impact on what's going on. So that's another reason why we sort of need to be data-driven when we do our recruitment. Okay, so now kind of moving on to something a bit more sort of interesting or practical. How do we actually be more data-driven? What does it mean? So I think there are 8 foundations of being data-driven. One is having what I would call operational heads-up displays, reports, dashboards in your solution. And that is probably the foundation stone. And why do I say that? What do I mean by that? I mean like a report that you are so reliant on that you use it every time you recruit. And there may be different reports. So I don't know how many people used Google Maps or something similar to get here. Anybody use that? Okay, lots of people. So, I mean, I would have been completely lost without it. So I needed that's a piece of analytics, that's a display that's basically guiding us, and we are reliant on it. The reason why you've got to have operational heads-up displays in your solution in order to be data-driven is that if you don't have reports that you rely on all the time, your data is not going to be any good. Because there is no incentive for you to keep the data good by having reports that you rely on that will tell you to turn left rather than right. If you don't have those sort of reports, then you're not going to keep your data up to date. Next one is about strategic step change improvement reports. So our recruitment is not just about obviously what we do day to day, but it's also about how do we drive big changes. So for example, Greg's sort of changes Greg was talking about in terms of his process improvements, that takes, sometimes you have to stand back, you don't see that day to day, you stand back, you look at all your data and you kind of go like, oh goodness, this is what's going on, I need to change my process or something like that. So we also need these kind of strategic step change improvement reports. And then the third foundation stone is to take the learnings from those kind of strategic reports, from that insight, and to embed good practice into your platform. Because we're all busy in recruitment. Recruitment is a sort of very kind of busy. We've got to get on, we've got to do this, we've got to do the next interview, screen the next candidate, hire the next person, run the next assessment centre. If you don't embed that good practice into your solution so that you follow good processes, then we're not going to get that kind of connection between the kind of strategic to our day-to-day life. So we need to feed that strategy back in. We want to also use analytics and data to drive end-to-end and cross-campaign coordination. And I'm gonna skip that one for the moment because I'm going to explain a little bit later what that means. But if you do good analytics and good kind of data analysis, what we can do is we can create synergies across our organization. And I'll explain what I mean by that. We want to use it to automate heavy lifting. We want to also use it to augment human decision making. And I'm going to next 8 slides are going to give examples of all of these. So I'm going to bring it to life. And then the other thing is about presenting information in a way that reduces our biases. So Greg had a really good example of that where he was saying that all of our screening and selection is name blind. I think that's what he was saying, yes. So removing the names is one way of removing the problem of being unconsciously biased by the name of the candidate in terms of making your decision. Okay, some examples. Okay, so this is a really simple example, and it's just literally when our clients are raising a job, what we want ideally to happen is, often our clients are quite big organizations. They have different, let's say, hiring managers saying, oh, I want to recruit a change manager, oh, I want to recruit a delivery manager, oh, I want to recruit a project manager. Well, probably those 3 titles are actually all part of the project management job family. And what we want to do is when somebody says, oh, I want to hire someone into one of those roles, we want them to recognize that it's part of that group of jobs, and we want to recommend a best practice way of actually recruiting that person. A good practice job description, a good practice selection process. So we have taken the learnings we've got, the strategic reports, and we've embedded it back by saying, this is a good practice process to follow, why don't you do that? If you don't want to, that's fine. You can modify that and change it and go in a slightly different direction, but we try and drive consistency across the organization. Next step, we're still raising our campaign, we're writing our job description. What we want is, in the solution, is we want, as you type, we want something to augment your intelligence. There's a piece of analysis which says, if you use this language, it's going to put females off from applying. So it's going to tell you, real time as you do that, not to do that. So, and use a different piece of language. How many of you have tools in your products today which tell you that basically the language you're using is going to put off? Yes. Okay, so probably 50%. So that's a really good example for me of being data-driven. Someone has spent a lot of time doing analysis, understanding what language is attractive and inclusive, and is augmenting your intelligence and knowledge with that. Okay, heads-up displays. And cross-campaign coordination. So this is actually one of our newer interfaces. Once I've raised my job for my change manager or my project manager or whatever. The beauty is, if I can identify that actually it's all part, if the platform can identify this is all part of the same job family, the same job group, what we've got immediately on screen is saying, you know what, there's already 11 ready to hire applicants in your platform. It knows that because what we've done is we've grouped all these different jobs and we recognize similar jobs. And when we advertise them in a similar way. And we're using similar recruitment processes throughout the process. And so we're creating these kind of synergies rather than, raising one job advert for this job and then a month later raising another one that's completely different, forgetting that we raised one 2 months ago. We've already got a pipeline of candidates from the last time we raised the job. So this was this kind of a concept I was trying to make of using data to create synergies across your organization. We want to find the commonalities across the organization, and we can use that in order to create these talent pipelines. And I'm going to explain that a little bit more later. So we've raised our vacancy. We've kind of grouped our jobs in order to try and create these synergies in the organization. These candidate pipelines we've got, we need to engage the people. And we know that the best way to engage someone is to address their concerns, to talk to them in a personalised way. But you can't talk to all your candidates in a personalised way, probably, because there are quite a few candidates applying. So in this particular example, the Met Police has used automation to personalise its journey. So it understands some of the characteristics of the candidate as they start their application. And depending on those characteristics, it will show different information to the candidates. And in this particular case, what the Met Police actually managed to do is they managed to increase, or basically reduce, the dropout of female candidates by about 40%. There was a point in the process where a lot of female candidates were dropping out. They were anxious about what was coming next in the process. And it was a fitness test as part of an assessment centre. And by basically going, oh, it's a female candidate, I need to automate that there's an extra explanation about what this fitness test involves, and reassuring the candidates, they managed to drop the dropout rate by about 40%. So, but this is about, again, it's about, we've got a pipeline, we now need to engage that pipeline. We can use data-driven recruitment, we can use automation to basically drive engagement amongst those candidates. Okay, another police example is, to know how to engage people in what way, we need to be measuring their engagement, and we need to be measuring how they feel about our recruitment process. And this is a set of dashboards that Police Scotland built out in our platform for them to measure kind of at every single stage. I mean, they have been sort of forensic, but literally every single stage they ask the candidates how they're feeling about it, they're measuring what's going on. And they've built themselves out an amazing set of reports. And they've gone from a situation where candidates weren't very happy, and I'm sure there's still lots of opportunity for improvement. For now, 98% of candidates rate the process as good to excellent. It used to take them, apparently, weeks of admin to generate their monthly data report that they liked. Now, literally, this monthly report that they pass on to the rest of the business is a matter of 1 or 2 hours instead. And they were this year a finalist in another set of awards run by the firm. So we've talked about raising our campaigns, we've talked about engaging the candidates, we've talked about measuring the candidates as we go through. This is an example of automating heavy lifting in selection. So one of our clients is the Department of Work and Pensions. They recruited 4,500 people in 7 weeks. Don't know, we certainly haven't got 4,500 people in our organisation. That's like mini organisations in 7 weeks. Fairly crazy. They did it by a lot of automation, basically. They had tests in the early part of the process. They had asynchronous video interviews. They basically, this was during COVID. When they had to recruit a lot of work coaches, a lot of people were being made unemployed, and so they needed suddenly to have a whole load of work coaches. At the same time, they increased diversity. They saved, it's not on this, they saved 200,000 hours, they reckoned. 40% reduction in hiring costs. This is a very, let's say, modern use of data and data-driven recruitment. And this is about augmenting human decision-making. So this is a tool we have in our product. How many people have used ChatGPT? Yay! Most people use ChatGPT. Okay, so ChatGPT is based on what's called a large language model. ChatGPT can answer our questions because it has a really good understanding of language, let's put it this way. Now, a lot of candidates' submission of data is obviously written language to us. So how can we use ChatGPT or large language models to understand all that language that's being thrown at us? Well, one of the ways that we have used that is, this is a little paragraph that a candidate has provided to us about their leadership skills. And we know that, for example, in this organization, what they think leadership is supporting your colleagues. Leadership is providing direction. And so what the large language model has done is gone and looked through the text and found examples of those what we call behavior indicators and highlighted them to a recruiter and said, oh, we think this candidate, you said you're looking for leadership, we think this candidate has the leadership. This is why we think it has the leadership. Sarah, you could make a quick decision on this. We don't want to, we don't want to replace your skills, we want to augment your skills, and we want to make the job a lot quicker for you, basically, through data-driven recruitment. This is, I think, the penultimate example. So again, I don't know how many of you would you say that the onboarding and the pre-employment checking is a big burden on your jobs? Not so many of you. Oh yeah, a few is the answer. But certainly for a lot of our clients, a lot of our clients have literally hundreds of recruiters, and probably 40 to 50% of them are basically in the onboarding teams. So the onboarding teams are, a significant part of the job. And one of those clients is the Ministry of Justice, and they have used kind of heavy lifting. You're asking a whole series of kind of questions to candidates, trying to gather information from that. You can sort of automate that in a large-scale process in terms of asking those questions. They use also things like, how many of you use online right-to-work checks? So some of our, so some of you know what it is. Basically, many of our clients now have online tools which allow a candidate to upload their passport and will say, yes, this person has the right to work or doesn't have the right to work. So they've built in those kinds of things. And the other really important thing in this part of the process on the onboarding is you've done a lot of work to get them to the onboarding stage. We don't want the candidates to drop out. So the other thing they're doing is, in the same way as the Met Police was sort of engaging candidates by sending them, let's say, somewhat personalised but automated communication, they're also using that at this end of the story. And then my final case study, imagine you are recruiting and you are competing against Bank of America. Okay, Bank of America, 200,000 people. 200,000 people, 35 countries around the world, recruit 3,000 people a year into early career programs. What did they do? They've been a client for us for more than a decade. And it was really interesting. I stood up with the person who heads up the recruitment there quite recently, and she was like Greg said, constantly changing and thinking of new things that they could do to improve things. And what they'd recently done is they had basically pulled the activities into the platform and automated. If a lot of your recruitment process is not in your platform, how can technology be helping and supporting you? The other thing that's probably happening is there's probably a lot of, let's say, rework, and being joined up as an organization is quite hard if you haven't got it all in one tool. So what did Bank of America do? They pulled activities into their platform, so that means they cut external trackers, internal spreadsheets. Anybody here use spreadsheets at all for recruitment as well as their platform? Okay. So I understand why. It's flexible, it makes life easy, but hard to report on is the answer, and kind of hard to track really what's going on if you're doing that. And you end up rekeying stuff, and I don't know. They improved the integrations, and they did introduce on-demand video interviews. They cut 40 trackers. They reduced data entry by about 1,600 hours. They did 20% more interviews, so they did a lot more stuff as well by doing this. They saved 200 grand. This is the one where if you're competing against them, you should be worried. In this particular case, they cut the time to hire by 75%. They were doing, time to offer, just very clear here, time to offer, not time to hire. Their offer was taking them 4 months. It ended up taking them 4 weeks once they made this change. So a big change. Because they'd also done a lot more interviews and they kind of brought stuff into the platform, they'd actually extended their reach and got a lot more applications, which also helped them improve their minorities recruitment as well. And they got nominated for an award, which is always good. Onwards, key takeaways. We are promised market. We're in the final stretch. So these were the 8 things I talked about in terms of foundation stones for data-driven recruitment. It's not just about great reporting. You need this operational heads-up displays to make sure you have great data, but that's the kind of starting point. What does it allow you to do? Well, hopefully what I've managed to bring to life, if you think about, go back to those examples where we had these sort of common jobs being raised in the same way, so this kind of project manager and change manager being raised in a similar way to create a kind of single pipeline if we could of candidates. And also then we have that automation in engagement. We've created, or we're trying to create, coherent, engaging attraction strategies and strong, ready-to-hire candidate pipelines. So we're trying to create pipelines of people that every job we raise helps create this pipeline for the next job. What I didn't talk about, but is kind of an obvious follow-on, is that the first pipelines need to be of your own employees. The other, again, I don't know for most of you, but for most of our clients, probably not on the early careers programs, but for many of our clients, 30 to 50% of the people they hire are internal moves within the organization. And if you think about this idea of the fact that there's very few, there's a scarcity of talent and skills out there. And at the same time, we're getting loads of applications. Where are all these applications coming from? And Greg talked about getting 5,000 applications for 5 positions. Well, there are places where there are a lot of applicants. So what we really need to do as an organization, and this is hopefully what Greg's finding, is that early talent programs are in great demand because what you need to do is you need to bring people in at the entry level of your organization and then figure out the pipelines to move them around your organization. And fill a lot of your jobs through the internal people. The other thing the economists talked about was job hoarding. Apparently, job hoarding or employee hoarding. Apparently, new trend, we're all hoarding employees. So even when the economy is rubbish, we're all hoarding employees because we're worried about having to hire them. So hoard your employees, basically. How do you engage your employees and keep them in the business? You help them find new paths within the organization. Third is we want to support the hiring managers and the recruiters with good practice support. So we take that strategic data, we embed good practice into the platform. We want to do what Bank of America did, try and get rid of some of those trackers so we end up as being a sort of joined up team whose force is multiplied by a flexible best practice platform that kind of does the heavy lifting for you and automates things and gives you heads up displays. We talked about in the last one, that Ministry of Justice, the onboarding process. We want to bulk process and automate onboarding and the engagement in onboarding and the pre-employment checking in order to take that heavy lifting away. And the last one, I think this is practically the last slide, ultimately what we're trying to do is create this kind of visibility for operational, day-to-day, and strategic agility. And therefore continuous improvement. So one of the things I sort of said at the beginning, crazy world we live in. Last week we're all, Ukraine's top of the headlines. Next week it's Hamas and Israel. Incredibly changeable world we live in. Who knows what's going to happen next? So having great reporting and being able to continuously change is really, really even more important, agility. And that brings us to the end.